An obese black peasant woman was given to a duke as punishment by her father, but he had shocking plans. The church bell tolls. A drunken man drags his daughter through the dirt, shoving her at the gates of a stone manor. The crowd jeers, waiting for the duke to laugh in her face, but he doesn't. He looks at her and says she will serve him. From that moment, whispers spread. Servants sneer. Nobles sharpen their knives. Yet behind locked doors, the duke entrusts her with his ledgers, his lands, and perhaps even his heart. But danger coils in the shadows. His own blood conspires to ruin him and her. With one word, witchcraft. The prison door slams shut. Chains rattle. The villagers watch in silence. Will a woman the world despises rise to become duchess? Or will the gallows claim her, before love can save them both? Comment below, and tell me where in the world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button for more. The autumn morning dawned crisp and bright over the village square, where market day was in full swing. Wooden stalls lined the cobblestone paths, laden with fresh produce, warm bread, and the season's bounty. The air carried the mingled scents of ripe apples, fresh-baked pastries, and wood smoke from nearby chimneys. Marie-Thérèse moved carefully between the market stalls, her substantial frame wrapped in a simple but clean brown dress. Though some villagers cast sideways glances at her dark skin, still uncommon in their small French town, most knew her gentle nature. She paused near Widow Dubois's apple cart, where several young children were gathering fallen fruit that had rolled into the gutter. "Here now, little ones," Marie-Thérèse said softly, kneeling despite her size to help them. "Let me show you which ones are still good to eat." Her warm voice carried the lilt of someone who found joy in small kindnesses. 8-year-old Pierre held up a bruised apple. "Is this one still good, Mademoiselle Marie?" She took it carefully, turning it in her broad hands. "See here. If we cut away this dark spot, the rest will make a fine addition to your mother's tart." The boy's face brightened at her words. The peaceful moment shattered as angry shouts erupted from the tavern across the square. Marie-Thérèse's heart sank as she recognized the slurred voice of her father. The door burst open, and Gerard stumbled out, his face red with drink, though it was barely past morning. "Where is that worthless girl?" he bellowed, causing nearby market-goers to step back. "Marie, where are you hiding, you burden?" The children scattered as Gerard lurched toward the apple cart. Marie-Thérèse stood slowly, squaring her shoulders though her hands trembled. "I am here, father. Please lower your voice, you're frightening everyone." "Frightening them?" He laughed bitterly, grabbing her arm. "You're the frightening sight, big as a cow and black as night. What daughter of mine looks like this? Your mother must have." He stopped himself, but the cruel implication hung in the air. Marie-Thérèse flinched as if struck, though he had only grabbed her arm. It wasn't the first time he'd questioned her parentage in public, but the words still cut deep. "Father, please. Let's go home. I'll make you some soup to settle your stomach." "Home?" Gerard's laugh turned ugly. "We won't have a home much longer, thanks to you. Eating us out of house and home, taking up space, frightening away any man who might have married you." He yanked her arm, pulling her toward the manor road. "But I found a use for you at last." The growing crowd of onlookers followed at a distance, drawn by the spectacle. Marie-Thérèse tried to maintain her dignity as her father dragged her along, though tears threatened to spill from her eyes. She whispered prayers under her breath, asking God for strength. The manor of the Duke of Artois rose before them, its limestone walls gleaming in the morning sunday. The gates stood open for market day, when petitioners could seek audience with their lord. Gerard pushed through the gathered nobles and merchants, forcing his way to the front of the line. "Your Grace," he shouted, causing the guards to step forward with hands on their sword hilts. "Duke of Artois, I've come to settle my debts." The Duke had been speaking quietly with his steward, but turned at the commotion. Lucien of Artois cut an impressive figure, tall and straight-backed, with intelligent eyes that missed little. Though young for a duke, perhaps 30, he carried himself with the gravity of his station. "Who creates such a disturbance?" the Duke asked, his voice carrying without shouting. Gerard thrust Marie-Thérèse forward so roughly she nearly fell. "I offer my daughter in payment of taxes owed, Your Grace. She's strong as any man, though she eats twice as much. She can work off my debt in your kitchens or stables." Shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. Even in these times, offering one's child as a debt payment was shocking. Several ladies behind their fans whispered and pointed at Marie-Thérèse's dark skin and size. Marie-Thérèse kept her eyes lowered, shame burning in her chest. She had always tried to live with dignity, despite her father's cruelty, but this public humiliation threatened to break her carefully maintained composure. "You offer your own daughter as chattel," the Duke's voice carried a dangerous edge. "And you present this offer while reeking of spirits before noon?" Gerard swayed slightly but pressed on. "She's no use to me, Your Grace. Takes up space, eats too much, frightens decent folk. But she's strong and clever, with numbers worth more than the coins I owe you." The crowd had grown, sensing drama. Some laughed openly at Gerard's proposal, expecting the Duke to have them both thrown out. Others watched with a mix of pity and morbid curiosity. The Duke descended the manor steps slowly, his boots clicking against the stone. The crowd fell silent as he approached Marie-Thérèse. Though she kept her eyes down, she could feel his assessing gaze. "Look at me," he said quietly. Marie-Thérèse raised her eyes slowly, bracing for the disgust or mockery she usually saw in noble faces. Instead, she found herself meeting a steady, thoughtful gaze. The Duke studied her face for a long moment. "What is your name?" he asked. "Marie-Thérèse, Your Grace." She was proud that her voice remained steady. "And did you agree to this arrangement your father proposes?" "I." She hesitated, glancing at her father's reddening face. "I wish only to do my duty, Your Grace, whether to my father or to God." A slight smile touched the Duke's lips at her diplomatic answer. He turned to Gerard, all warmth leaving his expression. "You offer your daughter to settle your debts, yet you found coin enough for drink this morning. Perhaps the tavern keeper would like to know he was paid with money owed to your lord?" Gerard paled, stumbling back a step. "Your Grace, I." The Duke raised a hand, silencing him. He turned back to Marie-Thérèse, his voice gentling again. "I have indeed heard of your skill with numbers from the village priest. Father Benoit speaks highly of your assistance with the parish accounts." Marie-Thérèse's eyes widened in surprise. She had helped the kindly priest organize his ledgers, never expecting word of it to reach the Duke's ears. The Duke looked her in the eye and said quietly, "You will serve with me." A shocked silence fell over the crowd. Gerard's mouth fell open, and several nobles gasped audibly. Marie-Thérèse felt her heart skip a beat, certain she had misheard. The Duke turned to his steward. "Prepare quarters for Mademoiselle Marie-Thérèse within the estate. She will assist with the household accounts." He looked back at Gerard. "Your debt to the estate is now settled. I suggest you use what coins remain in your purse for bread rather than wine." With that, he offered his arm to Marie-Thérèse in a gesture that left the crowd gaping. "Come. We have much work to discuss." Still stunned, Marie-Thérèse placed her trembling hand on the Duke's offered arm. He led her up the manor steps, past the astonished nobles and servants. She felt the weight of hundreds of stairs on her back but forced herself to walk with dignity. As they passed through the great doors into the cool dimness of the manor, Marie-Thérèse sent up a silent prayer of gratitude, whether this was God's answer to her prayers, or simply a noble's whim. She vowed to prove worthy of this unexpected chance. The heavy doors closed behind them, shutting out the buzz of shocked conversation that had erupted in the courtyard. Marie-Thérèse found herself standing in the grand entrance hall, its marble floors and tapestried walls more magnificent than anything she had ever seen. Servants hurried past, casting curious glances at their master's unusual companion. The Duke released her arm and turned to face her. "I apologize for not consulting you before making this arrangement. If you truly wish to return to your father's house, I will not force you to stay." Marie-Thérèse shook her head quickly. "No, Your Grace. I am deeply grateful for your intervention and the opportunity to serve." She hesitated, then added softly, "Though I confess I do not understand why you would show such kindness to someone like me." "Someone like you?" The Duke's eyebrow rose slightly. "You mean someone who helps children gather fallen apples, someone who maintains dignity in the face of cruelty, someone who manages parish accounts without seeking recognition." He shook his head. "I have been watching the village more closely than many realize, mademoiselle. True worth is not measured by appearance or birth." Before Marie-Thérèse could respond, the steward approached with a ring of keys. "The blue room in the eastern wing is prepared, Your Grace. Shall I show mademoiselle to her quarters?" "Yes, thank you." The Duke nodded to Marie-Thérèse. "Rest and settle in today. Tomorrow, we will discuss your duties." He turned to leave, then paused. "And mademoiselle, welcome to Artois." Marie-Thérèse watched him stride away, his tall figure disappearing down a corridor. Still hardly daring to believe this turn of events, she followed the steward toward her new quarters, leaving behind the jeering crowd, her father's cruelty, and her old life in the village below. Marie-Thérèse stirred as dawn's first light crept through the small window of her chamber. For a moment, she lay confused on the unfamiliar straw mattress, so different from her thin pallet at home. The events of yesterday rushed back her father's cruel offering, the Duke's unexpected intervention, and her sudden elevation to household staff. The room was simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and sturdy wooden furniture. A plain wardrobe stood against one wall, and a small table beneath the window held a ceramic washing basin. It was more comfort than she had known in her father's cramped cottage, yet uncertainty gnawed at her. Was she truly a servant now, or merely a prisoner paying her father's debts? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Good morning, miss," called a cheerful voice. "May I enter?" "Yes, please come in," Marie-Thérèse replied, hastily smoothing her nightdress. A plump, middle-aged maid bustled in carrying fresh linens and a pitcher of warm water. Her friendly face creased into a warm smile. "I'm Mrs. Dubois, the head housekeeper. I've come to help you settle in and explain your duties." Marie-Thérèse sat up straighter. "Thank you, Mrs. Dubois. I confess I'm rather unsure of my position here." "Well, that's easily remedied." Mrs. Dubois set down her burdens and pulled up a chair. "His Grace has appointed you as assistant to Monsieur Gerard, our accountant. You'll be helping with the estate ledgers and household accounts." Marie-Thérèse blinked in surprise. "The ledgers? But surely that's unusual work for—" She gestured vaguely at herself. "For a woman." Mrs. Dubois' eyes twinkled. "Or for someone of your station. His Grace cares more for ability than convention. Father Benoit spoke highly of your skill with numbers, and the Duke has been looking for someone trustworthy to help sort out the accounts since old Monsieur Laurent passed away." She stood and opened the wardrobe, revealing several simple but well-made dresses. "These belonged to my daughter before she married. They should suit until we can have new ones made. Now, Breakfast is served in the servants' hall at 7 o'clock sharp. I'll send someone to show you the way." After Mrs. Dubois departed, Marie-Thérèse dressed carefully, in a gray wool dress that fit her surprisingly well. She plaited her hair neatly and studied her reflection in the small mirror above the washing basin. The woman who looked back seemed both familiar and strange, still herself, but in an entirely new setting. The servants' hall hummed with quiet conversation when Marie-Thérèse entered, led by a young maid. Dozens of curious eyes turned to study her, and the talk dimmed to whispers. She held her head high as she took an empty seat at one of the long tables. A bowl of hot porridge appeared before her, along with a thick slice of bread and a cup of milk. As she ate, she became aware of movement at the front of the hall. The Duke had entered through a side door and stood observing the breakfast service, his tall figure commanding immediate attention. His gaze swept the room and paused briefly on Marie-Thérèse. Though his expression remained neutral, she sensed him noting how she conducted herself among the other servants. She continued eating calmly, though her heart beat faster under his scrutiny. After breakfast, another servant led her to a small office lined with shelves of leather-bound ledgers. Dust covered many of the volumes, and papers lay scattered across the desk in disarray. Monsieur Girard, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, barely looked up from his work as he gestured to a chair. "His Grace says you understand bookkeeping," he said shortly. "Let's see what you can do. Start by organizing these quarterly reports from the tenant farms." Marie-Thérèse settled at the desk and began sorting through the jumbled papers. Years of helping Father Benoit had taught her to be methodical. She arranged the reports by date and estate section, noting discrepancies in rent payments and crop yields. As the morning wore on, she became absorbed in her task. The numbers told stories: which farms were prospering, which struggling, where repairs were needed. She was so focused that she didn't notice the Duke's arrival until his shadow fell across her desk. "How do you find our records, mademoiselle?" he asked quietly. Marie-Thérèse started slightly but maintained her composure. "They are in need of attention, Your Grace. But the basic information is sound. I've noticed some patterns in the farm reports that might interest you." "Indeed." He drew closer, examining her neat stacks of organized documents. "Please explain." She walked him through her observations, pointing out trends in the numbers that suggested which areas of the estate needed the most support. The Duke listened intently, asking occasional questions that revealed his own sharp grasp of estate management. "Excellent work," he said when she finished. "Continue as you have begun. Monsieur Girard will show you our current ledger system." The rest of the day passed quickly as Marie-Thérèse learned the estate's bookkeeping methods. Though some of the other servants whispered behind their hands when she passed in the corridors, she paid them no mind, focusing instead on proving herself worthy of the Duke's trust. As evening approached, she was copying figures into a fresh ledger by candlelight when a knock sounded at the office door. She looked up to find the Duke himself, standing in the doorway. "You work late, mademoiselle," he observed. "The task is engaging, Your Grace." She replied honestly, "I wished to complete this section while the calculations were fresh in my mind." He stepped into the room, and Marie-Thérèse noticed. He carried a small book. "I came to thank you for your diligence today. Monsieur Girard tells me you have already made significant progress in organizing our scattered records." Marie-Thérèse felt her cheeks warm at the praise. "I am grateful for the opportunity to be useful, Your Grace." "More than useful, I think." He placed the book on her desk. "This is a newer method of double-entry bookkeeping that I thought might interest you. You seem to have a natural gift for such work." She stared at him, Astonished by this thoughtful gesture, and his treatment of her as someone capable of learning and improving, no noble had ever spoken to her as a person worthy of respect. "Thank you, Your Grace," she managed to say. "I shall study it carefully." He nodded, a slight smile touching his lips. "Good night, Mademoiselle Marie-Thérèse. Rest well." After he left, Marie-Thérèse sat for a long moment, one hand resting on the book he had brought her. In the space of 2 days, her world had transformed completely, though uncertainty still lingered about her future. For the first time she felt something else too: hope. The church bells of St. Etienne tolled across the misty morning air, calling the faithful to Sunday Mass. Marie-Thérèse smoothed the front of her best dress, a dove-gray silk borrowed from Mrs. Dubois' collection, and took her place among the household staff, filing into the ancient stone church. The familiar scent of beeswax candles and incense wrapped around her as she entered. Shafts of colored light streamed through the stained glass windows, painting the flagstone floor in jewel tones. But today, something was different. Instead of being directed to the back pews where lower servants gathered, she was guided toward the front section reserved for senior household staff. "This way, Mademoiselle," Mrs. Dubois whispered, gesturing to a spot in the 3rd row. "His Grace insists you take your proper place as steward." Marie-Thérèse hesitated, acutely aware of the disapproving murmurs that rippled through the congregation. She could feel dozens of eyes upon her as she carefully settled into the pew, trying to make herself as small as possible despite her size. "Did you ever see such presumption?" A woman's voice carried clearly from several rows back. "To seat that creature among the respectable staff. Shocking," another agreed. "What can His Grace be thinking?" Marie-Thérèse kept her gaze fixed forward, though her cheeks burned. She had endured whispers and stares all her life, but this public elevation made her a fresh target for gossip. The wooden pew creaked as Mrs. Dubois sat beside her, offering silent support through her presence. The murmuring ceased as Duke Lucien entered through the side door, his tall figure commanding immediate respect. He moved with measured grace to the family's private box at the front of the church, accompanied by a slim, elegantly dressed man Marie-Thérèse hadn't seen before, though they shared similar aristocratic features. Where the Duke's face held warmth and dignity, his companions showed only cold disdain. "That's Baron Henri, His Grace's cousin," Mrs. Dubois breathed softly. "He's been away at court these past months." The Baron's sharp gaze swept the congregation and fixed upon Marie-Thérèse. His lip curled in an expression of such unveiled contempt that she had to lower her eyes. She heard him lean close to his neighbor, his carrying whisper clearly meant to be overheard. "So the rumors are true. My cousin has indeed lost all sense, taking in an ox of a woman to disgrace our family name." His cultured voice dripped with mockery. One wonders what other responsibilities he might entrust to such a unique creature. Perhaps next we'll see her dining at his table. Titters of nervous laughter rippled through the aristocratic section. Marie-Thérèse's hands clenched in her lap, her knuckles white against the dark silk of her borrowed dress. She felt Mrs. Dubois stiffen beside her in anger. The Duke's voice cut through the whispers, calm but carrying clear authority. "Cousin, you forget yourself in God's house." Before Baron Henry could respond, the organ began to play, and Father Benoit appeared at the altar. Marie-Thérèse gratefully lost herself in the familiar rhythm of the Mass, though she remained painfully aware of the Baron's presence throughout the service. When it came time for the announcements, Father Benoit cleared his throat. "His Grace the Duke of Artois wishes to formally acknowledge Mademoiselle Marie-Thérèse as steward of the estate's accounts and records." serving alongside Monsieur Gerard. The priest's words fell into shocked silence. Marie Therese felt the weight of every stare in the church. She forced herself to sit straight, though her heart pounded so hard she feared others might hear it. Furthermore, Father Benoit continued, "His Grace commends her skill and diligence in bringing order to the estate's books this past week, and trusts all will treat her with the respect due her position." More murmurs arose, these tinged with outrage rather than mere disapproval. Baron Henry's voice rose above them, sharp with derision. "Respect? For that? Indeed, cousin." The Duke's quiet voice somehow carried more authority than the Baron's loud scorn. "I value competence and integrity in my household. Mademoiselle Marie Therese has demonstrated both." The Baron subsided, though his face darkened with anger. The rest of the Mass proceeded in tense silence, broken only by the responses of prayer and song. Marie Therese barely heard the final blessing, her mind whirling with the implications of the Duke's public support. As the congregation began to disperse, she lingered in the church's cool shadows, not wanting to face the stares and whispers outside just yet. She moved toward a side chapel to offer a private prayer, but stopped short at the sound of voices from behind a column. "Have you lost your wits entirely, Lucien?" Baron Henry's acid tones carried clearly. "It's bad enough you've elevated a common peasant to steward, but a woman of her appearance? The scandal alone will destroy what little credibility you have left with the noble families. My credibility rests on just governance of my estates, not on the opinions of gossips." The Duke replied evenly, "Don't be naive, cousin. The other peers already whisper that you're too soft, too concerned with the welfare of peasants to properly maintain our family's position. Now you place one in authority over your own accounts, keep her near, and you lose everything." Marie Therese pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a gasp. She had known her position might cause talk, but she hadn't realized it could threaten the Duke's standing among his peers. "I would rather lose all but honor." The Duke's voice held steel beneath its quietness. "And I will thank you to keep your opinions to yourself henceforth, cousin. Mademoiselle Marie Therese serves under my authority, and I will not have her disrespected." "As you wish." The Baron's tone dripped contempt. "But remember my warning. When your reputation lies in tatters." Footsteps echoed on stone as the Baron stormed away. Marie Therese remained frozen in place, her mind racing. The Duke's defense of her touched her deeply, but Henry's words had struck home. Her presence clearly threatened more than just the smooth running of the household. It endangered the Duke's position among his peers, perhaps even his title itself. She heard the Duke sigh heavily, still hidden behind the column. The sound carried such weary dignity that tears pricked at her eyes. This good man had shown her kindness and respect, had valued her abilities above her appearance or station. And how had she repaid him? By becoming a liability to his reputation and authority. Marie Therese pressed herself deeper into the shadows as the Duke's footsteps moved past her hiding place. Through the church's thick walls, she could hear the crowd dispersing outside, their murmured conversations no doubt centered on the morning's shocking announcements. She remained where she was, surrounded by the scent of incense and the weight of new understanding. The Duke had defended her honor, at the possible cost of his own. The knowledge sat heavy in her chest, equal parts warming and worrying. She knew she should feel grateful for his protection, yet all she could think about was the risk he took in granting it. Whatever skills she might possess with numbers and accounts, could they be worth the danger to his position? The empty church offered no answers, only the whispered echoes of Baron Henry's warning. "Keep her near, and you lose everything." The morning dew still clung to the vineyard leaves as Marie Therese walked beside Duke Lucien through the neat rows of grapevines. The early autumn sun cast long shadows across the sloping hills, and a gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of ripening fruit. She found herself relaxing, despite the Duke's presence, her practical mind already noting details about the harvest to come. These vines have produced wine for over 100 years, Lucien said, his voice carrying a note of pride. Though I confess, the yield has not been what it once was. Marie-Thérèse paused, bending to examine a cluster of grapes more closely. The fruit looked healthy enough, but something about the leaves caught her eye. Your Grace, if I may. Please speak freely, he encouraged, stepping closer. She gently turned over a leaf, revealing dark spots beneath. My father, she hesitated, the memory of his cruel words still fresh, but continued. He kept a small vineyard. These marks, they show the start of blight. See how it spreads from vine to vine? The Duke crouched beside her, his fine coat brushing against her simple dress as he studied the leaves she indicated. I see it now, but surely not all the vines are affected. No, Your Grace. Marie-Thérèse walked a few paces down the row, pointing out patterns. It seems worst in these lower sections, where the morning mist lingers longest. The higher rows appear healthier. She realized suddenly how forward she was being, directing a Duke's attention like a common field hand. But when she glanced at him anxiously, she found only interest in his expression. What would you recommend? He asked, straightening to his full height. The question startled her. Well, the affected vines should be pruned back severely before the blight spreads, and perhaps clear some of the surrounding vegetation to allow more airflow. She hesitated, then added, though I am certain your vintner knows best, Your Grace. Lucien shook his head. Our vintner retired last spring. His apprentice oversees things now, but lacks experience. He surveyed the vineyard with new eyes. Your suggestion makes good sense. I will have it done immediately. He turned to her with unexpected warmth in his smile. You have quite an eye for detail, mademoiselle. First our accounts, now our vines. Is there anything you do not observe? Marie-Thérèse felt her cheeks warm at the praise. I simply tried to be useful, Your Grace. And so you are. His tone was gentle but firm. Come, let us check the upper slopes, before the day grows too warm. They walked together through the vineyard, Marie-Thérèse pointing out other signs she noticed. Where the soil seemed too dry, which rows showed the healthiest growth. The Duke listened attentively, occasionally making notes in a small book he carried. By the time they returned to the manor, the sun rode high in the sky. Marie-Thérèse excused herself to help in the kitchens, as she often did despite her new position. The cook, Madame Beaufort, had shown her kindness from the first, and Marie-Thérèse found comfort in the familiar tasks of food preparation. The kitchen was alive with the bustle of dinner preparations when she entered. Savory aromas filled the air as maids chopped vegetables and a young boy turned the spit where a joint of meat roasted. Madame Beaufort looked up from her work, flour dusting her arms. Ah, there you are, dear. Would you help with these herbs? They need stripping for the sauce. Marie-Thérèse settled at the worn wooden table, gathering sprigs of thyme and rosemary. She was aware of the whispered conversations around her, caught fragments about her morning walk with the Duke. Above herself, that's what I say, one of the younger maids muttered, not quite under her breath, walking about with his grace like she's some fine lady. Hush your spite, Jenny, Madame Beaufort said sharply. She's done nothing but good since she came here. The accounts are clearer than they've been in years. And have you forgotten how she helped your brother with his sums? Jenny flushed and bent back to her work. An older maid, Agnes, nodded in agreement. It's true. My Thomas couldn't make head nor tail of the harvest figures, until she explained it all patient-like. She's got a kind heart, our Marie-Thérèse, and a clever head on her shoulders, added Madame Beaufort, testing her sauce with a practiced hand. His Grace knows quality when he sees it, uniform or no. Marie-Thérèse kept her eyes on her herbs, but warmth bloomed in her chest at their words. She had not expected to find defenders among the staff, had grown so used to standing alone against the world's judgment. The afternoon passed in comfortable industry, and as evening approached, Marie-Thérèse made her way to the small room where she worked on the estate's books. The familiar scent of paper and ink welcomed her as she lit the frame candles, casting a warm glow over the neat stacks of ledgers. She had just settled at her desk when a knock at the door made her look up. Duke Lucien stood in the doorway, still in his riding clothes from an afternoon inspection of the estate. "I hope I do not disturb your work," he said, stepping into the room. "Not at all, Your Grace." Marie-Thérèse gestured to the open ledger before her. "I was just reviewing the vineyard accounts. In fact, after our walk this morning, I thought to check the records of previous harvests." "Excellent thinking." He moved to stand beside her chair, leaning down to examine the neat columns of figures. "What have you found?" "The yield has been declining steadily these past 3 years." She ran her finger down a row of numbers. "See here? The difference is subtle at first, but the pattern is clear." Lucien leaned closer, his shoulder nearly touching hers, as he studied the page. "Show me." Marie-Thérèse reached to turn to an earlier entry, just as the Duke moved to point at a figure. Their fingers brushed briefly over the ledger page. A sudden warmth sparked at the contact, shooting up Marie-Thérèse's arm like summer lightning. She drew back quickly, her heart beating faster than the simple touch warranted. When she dared to glance up, she found Lucien looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. Surprise, certainly, but something else too, something that made her pulse quicken further. For a long moment, neither spoke. The candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Marie-Thérèse could hear her own breathing, too loud in the sudden silence. The Duke remained very still beside her, his presence both commanding and uncertain. Finally, he straightened, clearing his throat. "Your findings are most helpful. Please continue your investigation of the records." "Yes, Your Grace." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He moved toward the door, then paused. "You have done well today, mademoiselle, very well indeed." Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Marie-Thérèse alone with her racing thoughts and the lingering warmth where their fingers had touched. She stared at the ledger, seeing not numbers but the memory of his expression in that charged moment. A look that stirred feelings she dared not name, that propriety and station forbade her even to acknowledge. Shaking herself, she returned to her work. Though the columns of figures swam before her eyes, she had a duty to fulfill. She reminded herself firmly, whatever warmth she had felt, whatever she had glimpsed in the Duke's face, it could never be more than a moment's fancy. She was here to serve, nothing more. But her fingers still tingled where they had brushed against his, and try as she might, she could not forget the look in his eyes, a look that suggested, for just an instant, that he had felt that same forbidden spark. Marie's fingers trembled as she traced the numbers in the ledger by candlelight. Something wasn't right. The tenant payments recorded here didn't match the amounts the villagers claimed they'd paid. For 2 days, she worked late into the night, checking and double-checking every entry. Her heart sank as the pattern emerged. Baron Henri's signature appeared on many of the suspicious records. The differences were clever, small enough to escape notice, but adding up to significant sums over time. Money that should have gone to maintaining the villages had instead disappeared into the Baron's private accounts. With shaking hands, Marie gathered her evidence and sought out Duke Lucian in his study. "Your Grace," she said, laying out the documents, "I fear I have discovered something troubling." As she explained her findings, Lucian's face grew grave. The Baron, his own cousin, had been stealing from the estate's poorest tenants. "Look here." Marie pointed to a column of figures. The villagers paid their full rents, but only half was recorded in the official ledgers. Lucien studied the papers intently, then suddenly reached for her hands, gripping them tightly. His voice was barely above a whisper. "You have saved them and me." Marie felt a chill despite his warm grasp. Baron Henry would not take this discovery lightly. She feared what his retaliation might bring. The harvest feast filled the estate's courtyard with warmth and revelry. Lanterns twinkled like earthbound stars while fiddles played merry tunes. Villagers and servants mingled, sharing platters of roasted meats and fresh bread. Marie moved through the crowd with quiet efficiency, making sure every plate stayed full and every cup remained flowing. Her dark skin glistened with perspiration as she worked, her sturdy frame moving deliberately between the long wooden tables. Some servants still gave her sideways glances, but others nodded in respect as she passed. The music suddenly quieted as Duke Lucien rose from his seat at the head table. He lifted his silver goblet high, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "To Marie-Thérèse, the truest Steward Artois has known." The crowd fell silent. Marie felt her cheeks burn hot as every eye turned to her. Her heart thundered in her chest, caught between joy at his praise and terror at drawing such attention. Then, from the back, a few farmers began to clap. Several servants joined in, others pursed their lips and whispered behind their hands. As darkness settled over the festivities, Baron Henry lurked in the shadows near the garden wall, his fingers clenched around his cup, eyes blazing with hatred as he watched Marie. "She will not sit at his side for long," he muttered, his words lost in the evening's merriment. The early morning peace shattered as boots thundered up the servants' stairs. Marie barely had time to draw her shawl around her shoulders before soldiers burst through her chamber door, their weapons glinting in the dawn light. Baron Henry swept in behind them, his face twisted with cruel triumph. He unfurled a scroll bearing official seals. "Marie-Thérèse, you stand accused of witchcraft and the corruption of noble blood," he declared, his voice dripping with malice. "Your spells have addled the Duke's mind." The soldiers seized her roughly, iron chains biting into her wrists. Marie's heart pounded, but she held her head high, even as tears threatened to fall. Duke Lucien stormed into the corridor, his face pale with rage. "What is the meaning of this, Henry?" The Baron's smile turned serpentine. "Dear cousin, surely you wouldn't risk your title and lands to defend a witch. Think carefully before you speak." Lucian's hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight with suppressed fury. But he remained silent, though his eyes spoke volumes of anguish to Marie. They dragged her through the village to the jail, throwing her onto the damp straw. Cold stone walls pressed in around her as she huddled in the darkness. As the church bells tolled vespers, Marie's whispered prayer echoed in her cell. "Lord, give me strength." 3 endless days stretched like years in the dank prison cell. Marie sat on her thin straw mat, accepting the meager portions of hard bread and cloudy water with quiet grace. The other prisoners, hardened by their own misfortunes, hurled cruel words at her through the bars. "Look at the great whale, thinking herself too good for prison fare," one man sneered. "The devil's own color, she has," whispered another. Yet Marie met their scorn with gentle words, her voice steady as she quoted from memory. "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." Some prisoners fell silent, touched despite themselves by her unshakable dignity. On the third evening, Beth, a kitchen maid from the manor, crept to Marie's cell window. "My lady," she whispered, "the Duke gathers support. 3 priests and a dozen villagers stand ready to speak of your goodness. His Grace works tirelessly for your freedom." Marie's heart swelled with hope, though fear still gnawed at her edges. As night fell before her trial, she knelt on the cold stone floor, her prayer rising like incense in the darkness. "Lord, if I am to perish, let my suffering be seed for another's mercy." The great hall of Artois Manor had been transformed. Where once feasts and dances brought joy, now stern-faced nobles sat in carved chairs along the walls. Anxious villagers crowded the back, whispering among themselves. 3 priests, including the aged Abbé Pierre, presided from a makeshift dais beneath the family crest. The heavy doors creaked open. Marie entered, chains clinking at her wrists, her head held high despite her ordeal. Baron Henri stood at the front, a satisfied smirk playing across his face as he gestured to 3 shabby men. These witnesses saw her practicing dark arts in the vineyard at midnight. Henri declared, "They'll swear to her evil influence over the Duke." But then, one by one, different voices rose from the crowd. "She taught my children their letters," called out Martha, a washerwoman. Thomas the baker stepped forward. "When my wife was sick, she brought bread and prayed by her bedside all night. The fields flourish because she showed us new ways to tend the soil," added Jacques, an elderly tenant farmer. More voices joined in, each sharing tales of Marie's kindness and wisdom. The abbé himself stood, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I have witnessed only Christian charity and humble service in this woman's heart." A hush fell over the assembly. In that silence, Duke Lucien of Artois strode to the center of the hall. His voice rang with authority and something deeper. "Love. I will not see her condemned," he declared, "for she is the heart of Artois." He turned to face Marie, his eyes soft with tenderness. "And she shall be my wife." Gasps echoed through the hall. Nobles shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Henry's face twisted with rage. But, before he could speak, the doors burst open again. A clerk rushed in, waving papers, his face flushed with excitement. "Your Grace, we found it. Proof of the Baron's theft. The real ledgers, hidden in his private chamber." The evidence was damning. Page after page showed Henri's systematic theft from the estate's coffers. His carefully constructed plot crumbled before their eyes. "Strip him of all claims to Artois," Lucien commanded, as guards seized his cousin. Marie's chains were quickly removed. Her legs gave way as relief flooded through her, tears streaming down her face. Lucien caught her before she could fall, holding her steady as justice triumphed at last. The chapel of Artois glowed with hundreds of beeswax candles on this autumn morning. Their light danced across the ancient stone walls, where generations of dukes had worshipped. Today, those same walls would witness something unprecedented. Villagers packed the wooden pews in the nave, their best clothes freshly pressed for the occasion. Noble families perched stiffly in the front rows, their faces a mixture of shock and grudging acceptance. The air hummed with whispered conversations and the sweet scent of lilies that decorated the altar. When Marie entered, a collective breath was drawn. She wore a gown of cream-colored silk, simple yet elegant, with sprigs of rosemary for remembrance woven into her hair. Her dark skin glowed in the candlelight, and her eyes shone with unshed tears of joy. Lucien waited at the altar, his heart visible in his expression as he watched her approach. His formal ducal attire gleamed with silver thread, but it was the warmth in his eyes that truly sparkled. Their hands trembled as they joined before the priest. The sacred words of the marriage ceremony echoed through the hushed chapel. When they spoke their vows, their voices quavered with emotion, yet rang clear with certainty. After placing the ring upon her finger, Lucien turned to face the assembled witnesses. In her, he proclaimed, his voice carrying to every corner, "I have found not disgrace, but salvation." The priest raised his hands in blessing over the couple, and a shaft of sunlight suddenly broke through the high windows, as if heaven itself smiled upon their union. As the newly wedded couple turned to leave the chapel, the bells began to peal joyously. Marie stood tall beside Lucien, no longer a cast-off peasant but the Duchess of Artois. Together they descended the chapel steps into bright sunshine, while cheers erupted from the crowd gathered below. Those who had once mocked her now bowed their heads as she passed. Marie's face shone with grace and forgiveness, as she and Lucien prepared to bless their people, now truly their people together. Thanks for taking a moment to feel with me. If this story reminded you of what matters, hit subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow, continuing our story.